It's been a little while since I've done a DIY project, probably because most of my projects tend to be somewhat Halloween themed. But around here it's always Halloween season, so what the heck. Now there's one particular film trope that always suggests that serious evil is about to happen, and that is a creepy old book. Now whether it's H.P. Lovecraft's Necronomicon or the Evil Dead's, well, Necronomicon, old books like this always suggest dark magic and evil rituals. At least they do when they're done right. I'm looking at you, Twilight Zone.
Is he a book?
That is so lame!
So whether you're in need of a Halloween prop, or you're just looking to class up your joint, today's project is to make a sinister and antique looking book. The first step is to print out the pages of the book. There are no hard and fast rules for this, but just for reference, I printed out a collection of my favorite short stories and some accompanying artwork. I printed in a strange font and used both sides of regular 8.5 by 11 inch paper. Once you have the pages, you'll want to bind them. First, I make sure that they're neatly stacked. Then I clip them together and added some C-clamps for good measure and also to keep the bundle upright. Along the edges that'll form the spine of the book, we're going to liberally apply some liquid crazy glue. Now because this glue is thin, it's going to soak down into the paper a little bit and ensure that these pages are firmly stuck together along the spine. Now obviously this brush is going to be useless after this, so make sure you're using an old, cheap, or otherwise disposable brush. After the crazy glue has dried for a few hours, we're going to go over the spine one more time with a thin coat of epoxy. Epoxy is more water resistant than the crazy glue, and that's going to be important a little bit down the line. Now as you can see, this actually came together quite well. Once the pages are bound together into a manuscript, the next step is to age them. The first part of this process is to char the edges to make them look weathered and uneven. We're going to just run the edges quickly over the burner of the stove. Keep an old towel handy to snuff out the glowing embers, otherwise you might end up burning too much of the page. This process is easier if you have an electric stove, but it can be done on a gas stove as well, or even with a lighter or a candle. You just have to be quick and careful and make sure not to let the fire spread too far. Now that the edges have this nice frayed look, we're going to soak the entire manuscript in strong, dark tea to make the paper look antique. And make sure you have a bucket or something that's large enough to fit the entire manuscript with room to spare. Add enough hot water to completely cover the bundled pages, and add 7 or 8 tea bags, or several teaspoons of powdered tea or instant coffee. The amount doesn't matter too much. The only guideline is that the darker the water, the less time you need to leave the pages in, which is good because you don't want the pages to stay submerged for so long that they disintegrate. Drop the manuscript into the liquid. Make sure to agitate it gently but frequently so that the darkening liquid gets in between all of the pages and has a chance to work. The bigger the pot, the easier this will be. You also want to add 2 additional blank pages. These will be part of the inner cover of the book. Check the pages often and pull them out once they reach the desired level of color. Keep in mind that they may continue to darken very slightly after pulling them out as they continue to absorb any remaining liquid. Gently squeeze out as much of the liquid as possible. Afterwards, I put them between 2 heavy baking dishes on a slight incline overnight so that some of the liquid will run off. Now it'll take a few days to finish drying out completely. You can help the process by putting the bundle in a 250-degree oven, but be careful. This can cause the outer pages to get too dry and brittle, or it might melt the epoxy on the binding. Honestly, a place in the sunshine with a gentle breeze is the best and fastest way to dry it out. But depending on the temperature and the humidity where you are, it could take up to a few more days. You just need to have some patience.
Patience, my friend.
And here you can see the finished pages. Okay, now it's time for the cover. I used upholstery fabric and thick cardboard. I also decided to add some metal hinges and a clasp to the cover to add to the antique effect, but that is entirely optional. I happen to have these pieces of cardboard that are exactly 8.5 by 11 inches that came from a box of printer paper. Now if you don't have these, just cut out pieces of cardboard to whatever size you want. In addition to the covers, you'll also need to cut a third, thinner piece for the spine. This is the upholstery fabric I chose because it looks like old leather, but it's thinner, which will make it easier to work with. Lay out your cover pieces on top of the fabric and measure out where you'll place the pieces and where you'll need to cut your fabric. These 45-degree cuts on the corners will allow us to fold the fabric over and pull it tight on the inside. I'm using spray glue, and then I'm going to press the cardboard down onto the fabric. These only need to dry for a few minutes, or whatever is recommended on the glue that you use. Putting some heavy weights on top will make sure they stick firmly. Now I'm going to prepare the metal hinges and clasps. You can sometimes find wrought iron fittings that would look very nice, but they're harder to find and typically going to be much more expensive. So I used inexpensive zinc-plated fittings from the hardware store. To remove that shiny finish, I soaked them in a solution of boiling water and lye, which corrodes the zinc on the surface. These are paper fasteners, also known as brads. Now, as you can see, they're a shiny brass color, which doesn't fit in at all with the antique look we're going for. The best way I found to age the brass is to give them a quick soak in vinegar and then heat them up. You can do this in a 450-degree oven, on the burner of a stove, or in a fire. I'm using the stovetop method as I find it to be the fastest. Here you can see that the shiny brass finish is now a dull grayish black, very similar to the zinc steel fittings. On the outside cover, mark out where the fittings are going to go and then punch small guide holes where necessary. Glue the fittings into place and then attach them with the brads. Now we're going to glue those two blank aged pages to the inner covers, which will cover the points of the brads. Once those are on, we can fold the fabric over and glue the edges down. Now you can see that the edges didn't come together as tightly and as neatly as I was hoping. So if you do decide to try this, just leave yourself some extra space and it should work just fine. Learn from my mistakes. The cover is now completed and we're on to the last step. We're going to put a thick layer of epoxy down on the spine and press the bundled pages down into it. You can see one unintended consequence here, and that's that as the epoxy dried, it caused the spine to bow in a little bit and make this curve. It's not ideal, but it's not going to affect the finished product too much. And here's the finished result. So this is my first attempt at this project. I didn't have any sort of tutorial to follow. It was just something I kind of envisioned in my head and jumped right in. I'm sure that everything I did probably could have been done better or done easier, but nevertheless, I'm really happy with how this turned out. Hopefully this tutorial was easy enough to follow, and that you not only follow the steps that I provided, but really make this project your own and improve upon it. If you like this project, let me know in the comments. And if you do end up making one of your own, show me. Show it off.
You show me yours, I'll show you mine.
And of course, you can always like and subscribe. That'll make you aces in my book. Oh, come on. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.